The small town of Willow Creek woke each morning to the sound of church bells and the steady rush of the river that ran along its edge. It was a town where people knew one another by name, where shopkeepers still chalked daily specials on boards outside their stores, and where evenings ended with front porch conversations as the sky dimmed to purple. To outsiders, it was quaint, perhaps even dull. To Nora Williams, it was the safest place she had ever known. Her house stood at the end of a quiet lane bordered by oak trees. It wasn't much to look at from the outside, white paint peeling on the siding, shutters faded by sun and rain, but inside it carried the warmth of a life carefully built. The living room smelled faintly of old books and lavender, the piano against the wall gleaming from constant use. Nora had chosen this house a decade ago, not for its beauty but for its promise of peace. Far from the noise and hurt she had fled, Nora herself carried that same mixture of strength and wear. In her early 30s now, she had the kind of beauty that drew little attention at first glance, but lingered in memory, a quiet grace, steady brown eyes, hair tied back more often than styled. Her hands were strong, shaped by hours at the piano keys, though the lines at the corners of her mouth spoke of burdens she rarely voiced. To the townspeople, she was simply Miss Williams, the piano teacher at the library and community centre, the single mother who never complained and never spoke of her past. And then there was Eli. Eli was 10 years old and endlessly curious, his energy filling every corner of the house. He loved running through the woods by the river, climbing rocks, and collecting strange sticks or shiny stones that he insisted were treasures. But more than anything, Eli loved music. He could spend entire afternoons at the piano, pressing the keys with awkward but determined fingers, humming melodies that only half made sense. Nora guided him when she could, but often she let him explore on his own, watching silently as his face shifted from frustration to joy when a tune came together. There were moments when she caught her breath because, in those expressions, she saw Adrian Cole, the name she never spoke in Willow Creek, not even to herself. He had once been everything to her: brilliance, passion, fire. He had been a musician whose songs had filled clubs and theaters, whose smile had made her believe in forever. And he had been the man who left, swallowed by ambition and chaos, leaving Nora with a broken heart and a child she raised alone. She told herself she had closed that chapter. She told herself she didn't need him, that Eli didn't need him either. But sometimes, when Eli bent over the piano with the same furrowed brow Adrian used to have, she had to leave the room, afraid of drowning in memories. That Tuesday evening, dinner simmered on the stove, spaghetti and sauce, the kind of meal Eli loved. He sat at the kitchen table, a pencil in hand, homework spread out before him. But instead of focusing on math problems, he doodled little notes along the margin of the page. "Mom," he said suddenly, without looking up, "why don't I have a dad like the other kids?" The question landed like a stone in Nora's chest. Her hand froze on the spoon she was stirring with. She kept her back turned for a moment, willing herself to breathe, then set the spoon down carefully and turned to face him. "You do have a dad," she said softly. "He just isn't here." Eli frowned, eyes narrowing. "Where is he then?" Nora crossed the room and sat opposite him. She folded her hands, choosing her words carefully. "He lives far away. It's complicated." "That's what you always say," Eli muttered, tapping his pencil against the paper. "But at school, everyone else has a dad. They go fishing, they play ball, they fix stuff. Mr. Green said maybe mine is dead. And that's why you don't talk about him. Is that true? Nora's heart twisted. She reached out, but Eli pulled his hands under the table. No, she said firmly. He isn't dead. Then why doesn't he come see me? Eli's voice wavered. Doesn't he want me? The words sliced through her like a knife. She felt her throat close, tears pressing at the corners of her eyes. It's not about that, she whispered. Sometimes adults make mistakes. Sometimes life gets in the way. But that's not fair. Eli burst out. His chair scraped against the floor as he stood. I didn't do anything wrong. I know, Nora said quickly, rising too. She knelt so they were eye level, her voice shaking. You've never done anything wrong. This is not your fault, Eli. Not ever. Eli's lip trembled. For a moment, he looked like the toddler who used to cling to her skirts. But then he turned away, snatching up his pencil. You never tell me anything, he muttered. It's like he's a ghost. Nora closed her eyes, pain washing over her. She wanted to tell him everything, that his father had been brilliant and selfish, that he had loved music more than life itself, that she had loved him too, until it had broken her. She wanted to say Adrian's name aloud, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she whispered, I'm sorry, and Eli, already hunched over his homework again, didn't answer. The rest of the week passed in uneasy silence. Nora kept her smile in place while teaching her students at the community center, praising their hesitant scales and cheerful mistakes, but her mind lingered on Eli's words. Doesn't he want me? That single question echoed through her chest, heavier than any music she had ever played. Eli, for his part, grew quieter. He still practiced piano in the afternoons, but the melodies he tapped out were softer now, wandering, unfinished. He stayed longer in his room after school, sketching in his notebook or staring out the window. Nora wanted to reach him, but every time she opened her mouth, fear sealed it shut. One Saturday morning, sunlight streamed into the living room as Eli sat at the piano. His fingers fumbled over a melody he had been inventing all week. Nora listened from the doorway, recognizing the tune. It sounded familiar, haunting even. For a moment, she thought she could hear Adrian in it, the echo of a song he once played late into the night. Her heart clenched, but she said nothing. Eli noticed anyway. He glanced up, catching the flicker in her eyes. Did he play, too? He asked suddenly. Nora froze. Who? My dad, Eli said, his voice steady now. Did he play the piano? Her throat went dry. She wanted to lie, to dismiss it, but she couldn't. Slowly, she nodded. Yes, he played. Better than anyone I ever knew. Eli's eyes lit up not with joy, but with something sharper. Then why isn't he here to play with me? Nora looked away, blinking hard. Because he made choices that took him away from us. Eli stared at her, unsatisfied, then turned back to the keys. The melody he played shifted, darker now, each note sharp with unspoken anger. That afternoon, Nora asked him to fetch a box of winter blankets from the attic. She thought it would distract him. Instead, Eli stumbled upon something she hadn't touched in years. A crate of old records. Dust coated the covers, but one stood out, the photograph of a man beneath stage lights. Guitar in hand, his name printed bold across the sleeve. Adrian Cole. Eli froze. His pulse raced as he traced the letters with his finger. On the back, he spotted a small dedication. For N.W. Hart hammering. He clutched the record and thundered down the stairs. Mum, he called, his voice breaking. Who is this? Is he my dad? Nora turned from the kitchen, her face draining of color as her eyes locked on the record in Eli's hands. The room seemed to shrink around her. Where did you find that? She whispered. In the attic, Eli said, holding it tighter. It says your initials. Is he my dad? Tell me the truth. Nora reached for the record, but Eli pulled it back, his expression fierce. You always hide everything. I want to know. Tears stung her eyes. She sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. Yes, she whispered finally. He's your father. The words hung heavy between them. Eli's face flushed, his chest rising and falling quickly. Then why did you lie? Why didn't you ever tell me? Nora lifted her head, eyes shining with regret. Because I wanted to protect you. Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Eli shouted. Afraid I'd want him. Afraid I'd want more than just you. The accusation cut deep. Nora shook her head desperately. No, Eli. Afraid that he would hurt you the way he hurt me. Eli stared at her for a long moment, then hugged the record to his chest. I want to meet him, he said quietly, firmly. Nora's heart nearly stopped. Fear surged through her, but she saw the resolve in her son's eyes, the same resolve Adrian once had when chasing his music. In that instant, she knew the past she had worked so hard to bury was about to resurface. Eli barely slept that night. The record lay on his desk beside his lamp, the man on the cover staring back at him with a confidence that felt both foreign and familiar. Adrian Cole, his father. The name alone hummed in his head like a melody he couldn't shake. In the dim light of his room, Eli traced the edges of the sleeve, then carefully slid the vinyl out. The grooves glinted in the glow, whispering secrets of a life he'd never known. He didn't own a turntable, but that didn't stop him from imagining the sound, what his father's voice might be like. What words he might have sung. By morning, Nora found him at the table. The record clutched to his chest, eyes heavy with exhaustion. She tried to take it from him, but he refused. I just want to hear him, he said quietly. Nora's chest tightened. Eli, please. Some songs aren't safe. Some memories aren't worth reliving. But Eli's jaw set with a stubbornness she recognized all too well. I need to know who he is. I need to know who I am. That day at school, Eli couldn't concentrate. While his classmates buzzed about weekend plans and traded snacks, he sketched the record cover in the margins of his notebook, shading in the bold letters of his father's name. He felt both exhilarated and angry exhilarated that he finally had proof. Angry that his mother had hidden it from him. When the final bell rang, instead of heading home, Eli detoured downtown. He ducked into a small music shop, the kind that smelled of dust and vinyl sleeves. Walls lined with faded posters of bands long forgotten. Behind the counter stood an older man with silver hair tied back in a ponytail, adjusting the dials of a vintage stereo. Help you, kid? The man asked, his voice rough but kind. Eli held up the record, his hands trembling. Do you know him? Adrian Cole. The man's brows shot up. He whistled low. Haven't heard that name in years. Yeah, I knew him. Used to come through here, back when the scene was alive. Played like a man who thought music could save him. Eli's breath caught. Do you have anything of his? A player for this record? The shop owner studied him, eyes narrowing. You family? Eli hesitated, then nodded. I think he's my dad. The man's expression softened, a mixture of surprise and pity. Without another word, he led Eli to an old turntable in the corner. Carefully, he set the record down, lowered the needle, and with a soft crackle, music filled the room. A voice, rich, aching, alive, poured through the speakers. Adrian Cole's voice. Eli stood frozen, every hair on his arms standing on end. It was as if the man on the cover had stepped into the room. The lyrics spoke of longing, of roads not taken, of love burned too soon, and woven through it all was a rawness, a fragility that made Eli's chest ache. "That's him," the shop owner murmured. "That's your old man." Eli's eyes blurred with tears he hadn't expected. For the first time in his life, he heard his father, not just a name, not just a secret, but a voice that seemed to call out to him across time. Eli couldn't shake the sound of his father's voice. The melody clung to him like smoke, wrapping around every thought, every step he took on the way home. By the time he reached the apartment door, he was already rehearsing the lie he'd tell Nora about where he'd been. But Nora was waiting. Arms crossed, eyes sharp with a mother's intuition. "Where were you?" she demanded. Eli froze, clutching his backpack. The record shop's dust still clung to his clothes, the faint smell of vinyl lingering. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. "I was studying," he muttered, but the hesitation betrayed him. Nora stepped closer, her voice trembling now, less angry than afraid. "You found someone, didn't you? Someone who remembered him." The silence between them was answer enough. Nora's shoulders sagged, her strength draining away. She turned, pressing her palms against the counter as if holding herself up. "Eli, I told you. Digging into this will only hurt you." But Eli's frustration boiled over. "Why, Mum? Why is it so dangerous to know my own father? You act like he's some kind of criminal." Nora spun around, eyes blazing. "Because I was there." Her voice cracked like glass breaking. "I saw what loving him did. The crowds, the lies, the nights he didn't come home. And then..." She cut herself off, swallowing hard. "I promised myself I would never let you fall into that world." Eli's chest tightened. The words stung, but they only made him more determined. "You don't get to decide who I am," he whispered, then stormed past her into his room, slamming the door. Inside, he pulled the record sleeve from his bag, tracing his father's face with trembling fingers. The shop owner's words echoed in his mind, played like a man who thought music could save him. What had Adrian been trying to save? That night, Eli lay awake, headphones on, listening to a shaky recording he'd begged the shop owner to copy onto his phone. Adrian's voice filled his ears, raw and unpolished. A man singing like he was bleeding into the microphone. In the middle of one song, a line jolted Eli upright. "For the son I'll never hold, the life I'll never see." Eli's heart pounded. Could Adrian have known about him? Was this lyric just poetry, or was it meant for him? The question gnawed at him until dawn. The next day, he returned to the music shop. The old man wasn't surprised. "Knew you'd be back," he said, handing Eli a stack of faded flyers and a box of cassette tapes. "This is all I've got left of Adrian. Gigs, demos, interviews. Might help you piece together the man he was." Eli clutched the box like treasure. "Thank you. I need to know everything." But as he turned to leave, the shop owner caught his arm. His tone dropped, heavy with warning. "Be careful, kid. Adrian wasn't just a singer. He got mixed up in things, debts, people who didn't forgive. If you're his blood, some of that shadow might follow you." Eli's stomach twisted, but he nodded. The warning only made him more curious. At home, he hid the box under his bed. Nora knocked softly on his door that evening, her voice gentler now. "Eli, can we talk?" But Eli sat in silence, headphones on, pretending not to hear. The music was louder than her words, and in it, he felt closer to Adrian than he ever had to his mother. And so the divide grew. Nora, fighting to protect her son from a past she feared. Eli diving headfirst into the mystery of a father, whose voice still echoed through dusty records and broken lyrics. Somewhere between them, the truth waited. The box beneath Eli's bed became his secret world. Each night, after Nora had gone to sleep, he'd pull it out, spreading the contents across his desk. Cassette tapes with peeling labels, flyers yellowed at the edges, photographs curled with age. One photo caught his eye more than the others, a group shot of a band in some dingy club, the air hazy with smoke. In the center stood Adrian, guitar slung low, his smile wide but eyes distant. Beside him was another man, older, with wild hair and a mischievous grin. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, was scrawled, "Me and Rick, 93, the night we thought we'd made it." Rick, the name burned in Eli's mind. If Adrian had a partner, maybe Rick knew what happened. Maybe he held the missing pieces Nora refused to give. The next day, Eli skipped his last class and returned to the music shop. The silver-haired owner leaned on the counter, raising a brow when Eli slid the photo across. "You know him?" Eli asked, hope trembling in his voice. The man squinted, then let out a low chuckle. "Rick Dalton. Haven't heard that name in decades." If Adrian was fire, Rick was gasoline. They made one hell of a team until it all blew up. Eli leaned forward. "Do you know where he is now?" The shop owner hesitated, then scribbled an address on a torn receipt. "He hangs around the east side, still chasing ghosts, if you ask me. But listen, don't go looking for salvation in that man. He's as broken as the past he carries." Eli didn't care. Clutching the address, he felt his pulse quicken. This was at the first real step toward the truth. That evening, while Nora cooked dinner, Eli slipped out, the lie already rehearsed. He followed the cracked sidewalks of the east side, where neon signs flickered and bars hummed with forgotten souls. The address led him to a run-down apartment building, its bricks crumbling, the smell of stale beer hanging in the stairwell. He knocked. For a long moment, nothing. Then the door creaked open, revealing a man in his 50s, hair unkempt, eyes bloodshot but sharp. The man grunted. "Are you Rick Dalton?" Eli asked, his voice wavering. The man's gaze dropped to the photo in Eli's hand. His expression softened, almost nostalgic. "Haven't seen that in years." "You, Adrian's kid?" Eli's breath caught. "You knew him?" Rick stepped aside, motioning him in. The apartment smelled of cigarettes and old records. Instruments lay scattered, an amp buzzing faintly. A guitar with snapped strings leaning against the wall. Rick poured himself a drink, then slumped into a chair. "Knew him? He was my brother in everything but blood." Adrian Cole wasn't just a singer. He was a storm. And storms don't last. Eli sat on the edge of the couch, gripping the photo. What happened to him? Where did he go? Rick's laugh was bitter, hollow. "That's the million-dollar question, kid. One day he was on the edge of making it big, the next he vanished. Some say he ran from debts. Others say the industry chewed him up. Me, I think he broke under the weight of his own music. Eli leaned forward, desperation in his eyes. But you must know something. Anything. I need the truth. Rick stared at him for a long time, then sighed. Truth is, Adrian left pieces of himself everywhere. Songs, letters, tapes. You want answers? Start with his music. That's where he hid everything. He reached for an old shoebox under the table and slid it across. Inside were more tapes, scrawled with titles that sounded less like songs and more like confessions. Buried names, echo of guilt for the boy. Eli's hands trembled as he lifted one. For the boy, he knew instantly it was meant for him. Asterisk, the shoebox sat heavy in Eli's lap as if it carried not just tapes, but the weight of his father's ghost. Rick leaned back in his chair, lighting a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating the deep lines carved into his face. You sure you're ready for this, kid? He asked through a cloud of smoke. Adrian didn't write love songs. He wrote his sins. Listening to him, it's like cutting yourself open. Eli tightened his grip on the cassette labeled for the boy. I need to hear it. Rick nodded slowly, then shuffled over to a battered tape deck on the shelf. The machine whirred to life with a wheeze as Rick slid the tape in. A click, a hiss, and then silence, broken only by the faint crackle of static dot. Then came the voice, Adrian's voice. But this time, it wasn't polished like the record Eli had heard in the shop. It was raw, fragile, like a man alone in a room, singing not for an audience, but for himself. The melody was soft, almost a lullaby. The lyrics, however, were knives. To the boy I'll never hold, forgive the blood that stains my hands. Forgive the nights I drowned in bottles, when I should have been your shelter. Eli's throat tightened. Every word felt like it was written across his skin. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Rick watched him quietly, his usual cynicism replaced by something gentler. He recorded that a month before he disappeared. No one ever heard it but me. I figured, maybe one day his kid would come looking. The song continued. Verses unraveling secrets Eli hadn't imagined. Debts to men who didn't forget. Fights that ended with broken bones. Promises shattered under the weight of addiction. And through it all, the refrain, I'm sorry, my boy. By the time the tape clicked off, Eli was trembling. His chest ached with a grief that wasn't entirely his own. He pressed his palms to his face, tears hot against his skin. Rick stubbed out his cigarette, his voice low. Your old man was many things brilliant, reckless, selfish, but he wasn't heartless. He carried you in his songs, even when he couldn't carry himself. Eli swallowed hard, his voice cracking. Why didn't he come back? If he cared, why didn't he stay? Rick's gaze darkened. Because caring and staying ain't the same thing. He loved you, kid. But love doesn't cure demons. Sometimes it makes them worse. Eli stood abruptly, clutching the tape as if it were life itself. The walls of Rick's apartment seemed to close in the smoke, the stale air, the ghosts of a world that had chewed his father up and spat him out. I have to go, Eli whispered. Heading for the door, Rick called after him. Careful, Eli. The deeper you dig, the darker it gets. Some truths don't set you free, they chain you down. But Eli didn't stop. Out on the street, under the hum of neon and the chill of night, he pressed the cassette to his chest. His father had sung for him. His father had apologized. And yet the questions burned hotter than ever. Why had Adrian vanished? What had finally broken him? And most of all, could Eli bear the truth once he found it? Eli slipped back into the apartment long after dark, the shoebox tucked beneath his jacket. He thought Nora would be asleep, but when he pushed open the door, she was waiting at the table, the overhead light burning like an interrogation lamp. Her eyes went straight to the bulge under his coat. "What's that?" Eli froze. "Nothing, just school stuff." Nora rose slowly, her expression hardening. "Don't lie to me." She stepped closer, her hand reaching for the box. Instinctively, Eli jerked back. "It's mine," he snapped, louder than he intended. Nora's face twisted, not with anger, but with something sharper fear. "Where did you get it?" Eli's voice cracked. From someone who actually knew him, from someone who didn't bury the truth. Her breath hitched. For a moment, she looked smaller, as if the years had folded in on her. "Eli, please. You don't understand." But Eli was beyond reason. He slammed the box onto the table, pulling out the tape. "I heard his voice, Mum. He wrote a song for me. All these years you kept him from me like he was poison, but he cared. He was sorry." Nora's knees buckled, and she sank into a chair. Her hands trembled as she pressed them to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes, unbidden. "You listened," she whispered, double quote, "Yes, I listened." Eli's words were knives now. "And you lied to me. You made me think he didn't want me, that he was just gone, but he wasn't gone, was he? You pushed him out." The silence that followed was unbearable. Nora's shoulders shook as she fought to breathe. Finally, she looked up, her voice breaking. "Eli, do you think I wanted this? Do you think I wanted you to grow up without him?" Her words wavered, heavy with grief. "I loved him. God help me, I loved him more than anything. But Adrian wasn't safe. He wasn't safe for me, and he wasn't safe for you." Eli staggered back, stung by the rawness in her tone. "Safe? He wasn't some monster, Mom. He was my dad." Nora's hands curled into fists. "He was an addict," she shouted, the word tearing from her throat. "Do you know what it's like to watch the man you love destroy himself every night? To wonder if he'll come home alive or not at all? He sang to you, Eli, yes, but he drowned himself in bottles while I held your tiny body and prayed he wouldn't drop you when he stumbled through the door." Eli felt the air rush out of his lungs. The image was too vivid, too painful. He shook his head, refusing to accept it. "You're just trying to make me hate him." Her tears spilled freely now. "No, I'm trying to make you see the truth. The man you heard on that tape was real, but so was the man who left me sobbing on the kitchen floor because he chose whiskey over us." Eli stood rigid, the cassette clutched in his hand like a weapon. His heart screamed to believe his father, but his mother's anguish was undeniable. "At last," he whispered, "maybe he failed, but he still tried. He still loved me," and with that, he stormed into his room, slamming the door, leaving Nora alone at the table, broken open by the very truth she had fought so hard to bury. Asterisk. Nora sat alone at the kitchen table long after Eli's door slammed shut. The cassette lay between her trembling hands, the black plastic gleaming in the dim light. For years she had hidden these ghosts, burying them under work, under routine, under the fierce love she poured into her son. But now, they were clawing their way back into the open. Her mind drifted unwillingly to a night she had tried so hard to forget, Adrian had come home late, the front door banging against the wall. She remembered the smell before she even saw him, the sharp, sour reek of whiskey clinging to his clothes. His guitar was slung over his shoulder, one string snapped, his hands shaking. "Adrian," she whispered, cradling a baby Eli in her arms. "Please, not tonight." But his eyes were wild, red-rimmed. "I wrote a new song," he slurred, fumbling with the guitar. "It's for him." For our boy, Nora had begged him to put the instrument down, to wash his hands, to rest. But Adrian had collapsed into the chair, strumming a broken chord, mumbling half-formed lyrics while their son whimpered in her arms. And then, when she tried to take the guitar away, he'd lashed out not with his fists, but with words sharp enough to scar. "You don't understand music," he spat. "You don't understand me." That night, she had stood in the doorway, watching him drink himself into oblivion while Eli cried himself to sleep. And she had known deep down that love wasn't going to be enough to save him. The memory left her shaking. She pressed her palms over her eyes, but the tears slipped through. How could she make Eli understand? How could she make him see the danger of chasing ghosts? Meanwhile, Eli lay awake in his room, headphones pressed tight. The tape hissed softly, his father's voice bleeding through again and again. "Forgive me, my boy." The words carved themselves into Eli's chest until he couldn't bear it any longer. He grabbed his jacket, shoved the cassette into his pocket, and slipped quietly out the window. The night air bit at his skin as he biked furiously across town, the city lights blurring past. He needed answers Nora couldn't or wouldn't give, and he knew only one person who might tell him more. Rick. Rick opened the door in a haze of smoke and muttered curses, clearly surprised to see the boy again so soon. "Back already?" Eli nodded, breathless. "She lied to me. She says he was a drunk, that he couldn't take care of me. But that's not who I hear in his songs. You knew him. Tell me the truth." Rick studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "Kid, the truth's a tricky thing. Adrian was both. He was the man who sang his soul into every note and the man who drowned that soul in a bottle. You can't separate them." Eli clenched his fists. "There has to be more. He disappeared. Why? People don't just vanish." Rick's eyes darkened, haunted. "You're right. They don't. And maybe it's time you knew. But you'd better be ready. Adrian's story doesn't end with a song, it ends with a choice he couldn't unmake." Eli leaned forward, heart pounding. "Tell me." Rick hesitated, staring at the boy who looked so much like his old friend. Finally, he whispered, "Adrian didn't just run from the stage. He ran from something far worse. And if you keep digging, you'll find out what chased him." Outside, the city buzzed with life, but in that room, silence thickened like smoke. Eli felt it in his bones. The truth was close, too close, and for the first time, he wondered if maybe his mother had been right to fear it. Rick poured himself another drink, his hands unsteady, though not from the alcohol, more from the memories clawing their way out. Eli sat across from him, eyes burning with questions he couldn't hold back. "You want to know why your dad disappeared?" Rick said finally, his voice gravelly. "Then you need to understand the world he was in. Music wasn't just music back then, it was survival. And Adrian." He let out a bitter laugh. "Adrian played like he could save the world, but he owed half of it his soul." Eli frowned. "What do you mean?" Rick leaned forward, lowering his voice as though the walls themselves might be listening. There were men who backed Adrian, not record labels, the other kind. The kind who front cash and expect it back with blood if you can't pay. Gigs, tours, albums, they weren't just dreams, they were debts. And Adrian got in deep. Eli's stomach dropped. Debts. Rick nodded slowly. He thought if he could hit it big, the money would cover everything. But when the record flopped, when the gigs dried up, those men came calling. And Adrian, God help him, he didn't have anything left to give. Eli's grip tightened around the tape still in his pocket. So he just ran. Rick's eyes flickered with something between pity and regret. No, running wasn't his style. Adrian tried to fight back. He kept playing, kept writing, hoping a song would save him. But songs don't pay debts. And one night, he had a choice. Pay with his life or disappear. Eli's breath caught. Disappear. Rick nodded grimly. He walked off stage one night and never came back. No goodbye, no trace, just gone. Some say he skipped town, others say his voice faltered. Others say those men made sure he never sang again. The words slammed into Eli like a fist. He felt his chest tighten, his throat burn. No, he can't be dead. I-eyed, no. Rick leaned back, weary. Kid, I've seen the world take better men than Adrian and chew them up. If he survived, he's hiding so deep even the music can't find him. But if he didn't, all you have left are these songs. Eli shook his head violently. That's not enough. A song isn't enough. I need him. Rick's eyes softened, but his words were merciless. Sometimes a song is all we get. Silence filled the room. The hum of a broken amplifier. The faint tick of a clock on the wall, every sound seemed sharper against Eli's racing heart. He wanted to scream, to cry, to deny every word. But deep inside, a seed of doubt rooted itself. Was his father alive somewhere? Or had Adrian Cole's voice truly been silenced forever? Eli stumbled through the streets on his way home. Rick's words echoing in his head like a curse. Debts, men who don't forgive. A choice between life and death. The night air felt heavier now, pressing against his chest until every breath hurt. When he finally reached the apartment, Nora was pacing in the living room, her face pale with worry. She rushed to him the moment he stepped through the door. Where have you been? Her voice cracked with relief and anger all at once. Eli, I was terrified, but Eli shoved past her, slamming the shoebox onto the table. You lied to me again. Nora froze. What are you talking about? He spun on her, his eyes blazing. You didn't just keep him from me. You knew he was in trouble, that there were people after him, and you still made me believe he just walked away. Her lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, Eli saw not strength, not defiance, but guilt. Rick's warning rang in his ears. Adrian owed his soul. Tell me. Eli shouted, his voice breaking. Did you know those men wanted him dead? Nora's shoulders sagged. She sank onto the couch, her hands trembling. For a long time, she said nothing, and Eli's fury only grew. Finally, she whispered, yes. The room tilted. Eli staggered back, as if the ground itself had betrayed him. You knew. Nora buried her face in her hands. He didn't want you to know, he thought. He thought if he left, you'd be safe. He told me once if they came for him, they wouldn't come for us. So I let you believe he was gone. I thought it was better than telling you he might be." Her voice cracked. "Dead." Eli's chest heaved. The words sliced through him, crueler than any lie. "You should have told me. You should have let me decide how to feel about him." Tears streamed down Nora's face. "I was trying to protect you. Every day I prayed you'd never ask, never go looking. Because if you did, you'd find this darkness. And I couldn't bear to watch it swallow you too." Eli turned away, his fists clenched so tight his nails dug into his palms. His father hadn't abandoned him. He had been running for his life. And his mother had carried that secret like a wound for years. But none of it comforted him. None of it filled the emptiness. "You should have trusted me," he whispered. "Instead, you broke me." Nora reached for him, but he stepped back, the distance between them wider than the room itself. For the first time in his life, Eli looked at his mother and saw not just love, but betrayal. And in that silence, one truth settled heavy in his chest. He wasn't done. He couldn't stop here. If Adrian Cole had left behind a trail, Eli would follow it even if it led him into the very shadows that had consumed his father. Eli carried the reel-to-reel tape home like it was made of glass. His palms were sweaty, his chest tight. Every part of him screamed that this was it, that whatever waited on the tape would either heal him or break him forever. When he slipped inside the apartment, Nora was sitting at the kitchen table, her head bowed, hands clasped as though in prayer. She looked up, her eyes rimmed red. "Eli, where have you been?" He didn't answer. He just held out the tape. Her breath caught. The color drained from her face. "Where did you get that?" "In the club," Eli said, his voice trembling. "He left it for me." For us, Nora reached for it, then stopped herself, her hand hovering in the air. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't hear it again." "Then I'll hear it," Eli said, his jaw set. He found the old player Rick had loaned him and loaded the tape. The reels spun, static hissed, and the Nadrian's voice filled the room. It was softer than before, almost broken, but it carried a clarity that pierced straight into Eli's heart. "If you're hearing this, it means I couldn't stay. The world asked for pieces of me I no longer had. But know this, my boy, every song I sang for you." Eli's breath hitched. His mother's hand flew to her mouth as tears streamed down her face. The music swelled, a haunting melody of regret and love intertwined. Adrian sang of mistakes he couldn't undo, debts he couldn't repay, demons he couldn't outrun. But woven through every verse was a thread of hope, a promise that his love for his son outlasted the darkness. "You are the verse I never wrote, the chorus I'll never sing, but in the silence after the music, you are everything." The tape ended with silence. Not a click, not a fade, just silence. Eli sat frozen, tears blurring his vision. The finality of it crushed him. His father was gone, truly gone. Not on tour, not in hiding, gone. For a long time, neither he nor Nora spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the player. Finally, Nora whispered, "He wanted you to know he loved you." That was all he had left to give. Eli turned to her, his face streaked with tears. "Why didn't you ever let me hear him? Why did you make me hate him?" Her voice cracked. "Because I thought it would be easier for you to hate him than to miss him every day like I did." The words broke something inside Eli, but in the breaking, something else began to heal. He crossed the room and collapsed into her arms. For the first time in years, he let her hold him, both of them sobbing into each other's shoulders. "He's gone," Eli whispered. "Yes," Nora murmured, stroking his hair. "But he's still here in you." That night, Eli sat at his desk, the final tape beside him. He opened his notebook and began to write not just lyrics, but pieces of himself, raw and unfiltered. He didn't know if the world would ever hear his songs. But he knew one thing. He carried Adrian's voice inside him, and it was his turn to sing. The dawn crept through the window, painting the room in pale gold. Nora stood in the doorway, watching him with quiet pride. For the first time in a long time, the silence between them wasn't heavy. It was music waiting to be born. The club was alive again. Not the broken, dusty ruin where Eli had found his father's last song, but reborn lights strung across the ceiling, the smell of coffee and vinyl in the air, laughter echoing against polished wood. On stage, a young man adjusted the strap of his guitar. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. Eli Cole, 17 now, taller, his hair falling into his eyes the way Adrian's once had. The crowd was small neighbors, classmates, a handful of strangers, drawn in by flyers, tacked to coffee shop windows. In the front row sat Nora, her eyes shining with both pride and tears. She clasped her hands tightly, her knuckles white, as if holding on to the memory of the man she had lost and the boy she had raised. Eli leaned toward the microphone, his voice steady. "This song, it's for the one who never got to hear me play, for the one whose voice I still carry." The first chord rang out, soft but sure. The melody wasn't Adrian's, it was Eli's, but woven through each note was an echo, a ghost of the man who came before him. The lyrics spoke not of loss, but of carrying forward. "You are the silence after the storm, the light I found in the dark. Though the music took you from me, it gave me back my heart." Nora closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. For the first time, Adrian's absence didn't feel like a wound, felt like a presence. Watching from the shadows, proud of the son who had chosen not to be broken by his legacy, but to build from it. As the last note faded, the crowd erupted in applause. Eli smiled shyly, his cheeks flushed. He glanced at Nora, and in that look, 1,000 unspoken words passed between them. Forgiveness, love, continuation, after the show. A man from the back approached Eli, local producer, impressed by the rawness of his lyrics. He handed Eli a card. "You've got something, kid. Something real. Call me." Eli tucked the card into his pocket, but his gaze lingered on the empty seat at the edge of the stage, where he imagined his father might have sat, cigarette in hand, nodding along to the beat later. As he packed up his guitar, Nora slipped her arm around his shoulders. "He would have been proud, you know." Eli looked at her, his voice quiet but firm. "Then I'll keep making him proud." The two of them walked out into the night, the neon lights flickering above, the air thick with possibility. The past was still with them, always would be, but now it was no longer a chain. It was a song, and Eli was ready to sing it.